Globally, close to 3 billion people live on less than $2 a day, and everywhere the worst affected are children, women, and the elderly. Also, more than 800 million people suffer from hunger and malnutrition globally. Experts, scholars, diplomats are unanimous that reducing global poverty is arguably the main global challenge projected to last the next 20 years. Poverty, confirmed, is a breeding ground for disease, environmental degradation, internal conflict, and terrorism. A scholar said, and I quote, "If poverty decreases massively over the next 20 years, many other things will happen globally." On the program today, we shall be appraising United Nations Alliance for Poverty Eradication. Within the prism of global competitiveness, will it work? What governance model should be adopted to drive this initiative? My guest is His Excellency Ambassador Bulus Lolo, a career diplomat, farmer, community leader. He is the former permanent secretary in the Foreign Affairs Ministry. The program continues shortly. Stay with us. Always a pleasure to have you on the program, and after a while you're here today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back.
Okay, listening to the United Nations come up with an alliance for poverty eradication globally, this time is not an initiative within the states, or the nation states, Global Alliance for Poverty Eradication.
Right.
What, in your own perspective, how do you assess it?
Well, the issue of poverty at the global level has been on. One should go back to 1972 when the United Nations Conference on Human Environment took place in Stockholm. It was a United Nations conference, and for the first time there was a focus on human interaction with the environment. And it was as a result of that conference that the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, with its headquarters in Nairobi, was created. And 20 years later, in 1992, there was the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And there too, in 1992, the focus was on the environment. One of the landmark achievements of Rio was the Convention on Climate Change that led to the Kyoto Protocol. And today we have the Convention on Climate Change. And back then in 1972, when the world met with the UN convening, the idea was how to help nations reduce or alleviate poverty. These concepts have reoccurred, leading us now to the latest initiative which the United Nations launched last month that you are raising on the United Nations Alliance for Poverty Eradication. It's all because we've not been able to alleviate poverty, and to alleviate it actually simply means you are reducing its effect. You've not been able to reduce poverty because if you reduce, you are still going to leave some remnants. And so poverty eradication as an end goal presents itself as an action that must be done. And if the United Nations today is looking at poverty eradication, it is with hindsight to say that poverty has remained with mankind. And poverty has a debilitating effect and will continue to do so unless something is done. If you don't do something about poverty, it becomes almost like an opportunistic disease that will give rise to other problems in society, meaning your security, your well-being, your health, and all other things can, because of poverty, be compromised. And it's a welcome thing to see that the United Nations, even in the midst of the pandemic, is now saying they are forming an alliance. And that alliance means what? Bringing parties that are willing to work together to achieve a common goal. But how that will be done, how effective it will be, I think, how can we assess what is just about to start? So let's wait and see what the result will be.
Okay, at the high-level meeting, one of the concerns raised was what global governance model should the United Nations adopt to drive home this alliance? And if you ask, it's like trying to bring people of different levels,
Right.
different class, to be at par.
Right.
Looking at the prism of global competitiveness, will it work?
Again, I'm really happy that you are bringing two issues out, governance and competitiveness. Now, that which concerns governance has and will continue to be an issue because governance depends on who defines it. Everybody will tell you they are being democratic in their system, they are being transparent, and they are being open and accountable. But to what extent are they accountable? To what extent are they transparent? All depends on who is making the assessment. So at the global level, there is a serious issue of governance where the strong have continued to lord it over the weak. The rich lord it over the poor. And combined, you are weak, you are poor, you are then marginalized. Then competitiveness means what? Can you stand there with the other party and still hold your ground? Or you will be forced because of your own conditions to disappear from the stage. And we live in a world where if you are not competitive, you are going to miss a lot. And then for the initiative that we are talking about and the governance level that you think or you want to know if we have an adequate governance system, as well as the fact of competition. Indeed, there is an unequal strength, given that some are better placed than the others to become relevant, to eradicate poverty, and therefore to play at that global level. And in my view, talking about us as a country and Nigeria in particular, that we must do what is necessary, first at the national level, to create that space, that governance system that allows us to go to the heart of poverty and eradicate it. If we do so, then we can play at the global level. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we have to go back to the drawing board and do what we must do.
We'll still come back to Nigeria. Now, the global players today,
Right.
First of all, we want to think about which bloc they belong, which sub-regional bloc they belong, before even thinking about migrating or transiting to the bigger space.
Right.
Now, looking at the African bloc, within Africa you have the West African bloc, the South African bloc, the North African bloc. You go to Asia, you have the Southeastern Asia bloc and other blocs, European bloc. Thinking this way and working towards poverty eradication or even alleviation now,
Right.
do you think the comfortable will want those who are down there to join them?
Again, this is what you must, as a people, ask yourselves. Will anyone who has an advantage like to give it up? And the answer, of course, is no. Because by nature, man or the humankind is selfish, self-centered. But if you do what you must do, then you will have that space created for yourself. And you talk of regional economic blocks. We have them, with ECOWAS in Africa being the very first. ECOWAS was created in 1975. Since then, we've had it as an economic bloc. But if you ask, is ECOWAS living up to its expectation? Why are we having crisis in our sub-region? Why the level and high incidence of migration that affects the West African bloc? It is because we have missed certain opportunities. And for me, unless we go back and say, look, what have we done wrong? What do we need to do right? Then your ability to engage even within the continent will be compromised. And I believe that we must see in all of this the need to do what we have failed to do at the national level. And when it comes to the national level, my advocacy, with all the strength that I can muster, must begin at the local level.
When you say national level, are you referring to Nigeria?
Yes.
Okay, we'll actually come to Nigeria, actually.
Indeed. No, because, you see, it has to be the nation that will go to the region, and then the region to go to the continent, and the continent to go to the global stage. So if I quickly go into the local level, it is because that is where it must begin. Just like even at the local level, it must begin from the family level. So these are the steps and the stages that need to be taken for us to be relevant. And you have used it, competitive.
After that high-level meeting, a lot of factors already played out.
Right.
And one of the big factors you ask is, what are the threats to this alliance? Looking at security,
Yes.
looking at the problem of corruption, and looking at the problem of industrialization,
Right.
boosting diversification of economies. Now, back in Nigeria, let's start with Nigeria now. Since 2015, one of the strongest positions Mr. President has always gone with to canvass Nigeria position globally has been recharging the Lake Chad.
Right.
Recharging the Lake Chad. Looking at the economic enormity of Lake Chad Basin.
Right.
If you recharge it, this will happen. Now, in the light of this alliance, if the Lake Chad Basin is recharged,
Right.
what's your projection?
Well,
Not just Nigeria, but for Africa.
it's good you are bringing the issue of recharging the Lake Chad Basin. I had the rare privilege to be with Mr. President when he assumed office. And I heard him firsthand make a high pitch, in fact passionate pitch, for the Lake Chad to be recharged, pointing out the enormous benefits that will come to close to 350 million people that are dependent on that lake. And recharging it will do a number of things. It will clean up our environment. It will also provide enough water to service the belt that lake runs through. It will create wealth. It will boost our security. It will also reduce conflict, because along that Lake Chad Basin, that is now reduced to, in fact, I'm not even sure that the Lake Chad can boast of 10% of its former capacity. With each year passing and failure to recharge it or contain the enormous and rapid speed with which it is drying up, it only means that the size is shrinking with each passing year. And so when we succeed in the context of this global movement to get investors, to get commitment, and to get action and the political will for this gigantic project to be undertaken, it will not only be a win for us in Nigeria, a win for Chad, but it will be a win for Africa, because Lake Chad is an example of what has happened in the last 50 years to a continent that has and has had great potential. And I believe that the president has been making the right pitch to get commitment on Lake Chad, but unfortunately, the response has been very, very appalling.
Okay. If the United Nations that is driving this initiative
Right.
Is the platform where all nations are supposed to speak in an equal, is it 50-50 or
No, equal, it's, yeah.
100% equal? Nobody's higher, nobody's lower.
No.
Beautiful. Now, what indices would they use to drive it in terms of, if, for instance, if you want to share resources, there's what we call authoritative allocation of resources or equitable allocation of resources.
Right.
What model will they adopt?
Again, it's, don't forget, don't look at the alliance as a legislative provision where you would go and say, as you do with your federation account here, sit at the end of each month and say, we've realized this quantum of money, this is how much you take. No. The alliance is a voluntary group that brings together people who are committed to achieving the same end goals. All right? And number two, you do not have on the table resources that are going to be placed and therefore to be shared using a given formula. Rather, it's a network. And what then you need is the right mindset, the right leadership, and the right set of actions with an environment that is created. And here then, you have to even ask the task of that global alliance. What is it set up to do? And here I would bring out the issue of policy advocacy. In policy advocacy, there has to be policy coherence. And in policy coherence, you require consistency. The greatest challenge I believe that the world has faced and is continuing to face is lack of coordination at the global level. And this coordination is a problem because it depends on where you use the term coordination. To an American, coordination goes with convening power. Elsewhere, it is bringing ends together. So if your understanding of coordination is different than mine, it means that when you use the same term, what I take it to mean is different from what you take it to mean. And that brings the conflict. So when you call for global coordination, somebody will begin to say, oh, I'm ceding my authority to this body. That's not the case. Coordination simply means if you have the same set of people sitting in different rooms, let them be consistent in what they say. Not in room A, you are advocating one thing, and then in room B, you take a diametrically opposed view to what you just said in room A. This is the idea behind coordination. And I believe that we need to have that.
Okay.
We need to have it.
Okay. This initiative was brought to limelight within the pandemic, like talking about COVID-19. So it happened during COVID-19.
Right.
How do you look at it post-COVID-19?
COVID-19 has become a dividing phenomenon that we will from now be talking of what was before COVID-19 and what comes after COVID-19, without a doubt. because the way we do our things, the way we live, before and after, will not be the same. And I identify three things here. There is risk, there is challenge, and there is opportunity. The risk, I'm asking, and all must ask, do we stand the chance of suffering an injury or loss? That is what risk is all about. What do you stand to lose? Our economic gains across the globe have been eroded. Recently, I was listening to a program, and I think it was in relation to the United Kingdom, where it was said that they have lost close to 41% of their GDP. If that is the case with the United Kingdom, in America, they are facing the highest job losses since the Great Depression, and in fact has outstripped what it was in 1929. China, that was raging in its economic growth, went into recession. Is there a country that has not gone into recession as a result of the pandemic? That's the risk. And what is the challenge? The challenge is whenever you have a problem, it should stimulate an effort, a response. And there is a challenge in the pandemic. But I also see an opportunity. And what is an opportunity? An opportunity is a combination of favorable circumstances. Three taken together then: risk, challenge, and opportunity. Depends how much a government, a people, a community, and a collection will be willing to do. If you allow the risk to dominate, you know that you stand no chance. But if you take the challenge and come out with innovative ideas, chances are that both your risk and challenge will be overcome. And they will combine then to provide you with what? Favorable circumstances of doing the things you've not been doing. And for me, I hope and I pray that our leaders in this country will allow common sense to prevail so that our response to the pandemic will take us in the direction that we have failed to be all this while.
Okay. Excellency, I must say I have to hold you here on this leg of the program because kind of exhausted. Back end, you have talked about the fact that the time frame will not allow us to exhaust the program. So we'll tinker towards another leg of it. But ultimately, you are positive about the program?
Let me say I have an open mind about it, with a prayer and a hope that we will do things differently and not allow this long journey. I said at the beginning of the program that began in 1972. It will be 50 years in 2 years since the Earth Summit in in Stockholm. And we've been talking about poverty since then. Do we have the means and the ability to overcome or eradicate poverty? My answer is a resounding yes. Yes, because if the will is there, the way will be there. And I believe that it must begin from home. Let us start from here.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for being on Diplomatic Ties.
Thank you so much.
Well, the United Nations Alliance for Poverty Eradication is work in progress, and from what the guest said, if all the resources globally, nationally are pulled together towards the direction of the vision, then he is very positive about it, and I believe the world too is positive about it. That's it on this leg of the program. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.